Welcome back to Hobby Reviews by Hans, everybody. Now this little Gunpla here, disappointingly does not look anything like it does in the box. But that lack is actually our benefit here. So this video is going to be how to paint your very first Gunpla under the assumption you have never done this before. I will make the assumption you've assembled one, but you've never painted it. Now these SD EX Gundams are actually a perfect choice for this, because of course the first thing you need is going to be something to paint. These are a really good balance between size, detail, and not size. What do I mean by that? So cute little Gunpla size here. It's not too big, so you're not going to be intimidated by it. There's not an excessive amount of detail to it, but there is enough in there to make it look interesting. And when you're painting your very first Gunpla or any other model kit, that is your goal, is to paint it. That is your entire goal. Trust me on this. You're going to see a lot of people out there with other videos doing all these advanced techniques. They look fantastic, and don't get me wrong, you will get to that level. But if you have never painted one before, all you're worried about is your basic colors and basic detail. I will come back in a future video, the same exact Gunpla after we're done with this, and I will show you the more advanced stuff. But for today, I am not worrying about panel lining. I am not worrying about shading, edge highlighting. I'm not worried about color blending, jewel effects, any of that stuff. We are looking to get this guy just looking presentably good and ready for the next steps. And that should be your goal as well if you've never done this before. And there is only really one rule to Gunpla, okay, when you're painting these things. Ignore everybody else, there's one rule. That is the rule of cool, meaning that if you think it looks good and you're happy with it, that's all that matters, okay? Don't worry about what showing people on the internet might get. Don't worry about the likes. Don't worry about the accolades, things like that. That'll all come later. Worry about making yourself happy with this guy on your shelf, okay? That is it. There might be some other stuff later on for paint, blah, 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 blah. Don't worry about any of that stuff. Worry about making your first one look decent. Now, you've got your subject matter. You're of course going to need a couple more things. Now, unfortunately, if you've never done this before, your first time doing this, price-wise could add up, because paints, they're not super expensive, but they're not super cheap either, and you have to buy a lot of them the first time. The good news is these bottles of paint, on a guy like this, dozens of Gunpla easily before you even have to think about replacing your first bottle of paint. But the one thing you are going to need a primer. Now, some people say you don't need primer. I've been doing this for 40 years. I've tried without primer, I've tried with primer, I've tried many different primers. You need primer. And I would suggest sticking with a hobby-oriented primer as opposed to like a hardware store primer. Color choice in this instance does actually matter though. Most of the time it doesn't matter. Your Gundams, your Gunpla, primarily white, and white is a notoriously difficult color to paint, so you want as close to white as possible for your primer. Now the Citadel primers here, they're white scar, it's okay, it's not fantastic. Chaos Black is actually very good, but it'd be a poor choice for a white model. Now, if there's other brands in your hobby shop, don't worry about the brand so much. Just worry about that it's compatible with acrylic wargaming paints. The nice thing is that most of these paints are compatible with each other. You can use whatever mix and match brands that you want. So this is just the one I got because my hobby shop had it, and that should be your criteria too. Which paint brands do they have that they have all the colors you need? Otherwise, I do highly recommend sticking with an acrylic water cleanup type paint because they are very beginner friendly. At the same time too, when you start getting into more advanced techniques, they actually develop very well with you. Pick a brand that just looks interesting at your local hobby shop that they have all the colors you want. That is literally the criteria you need to go by. Don't worry about this brand, that brand, which one's better. No. At this point, you're not going to notice a difference. I picked up these Monument Pro Acryl paints simply because I actually wanted to buy Vallejo because that's one of my favorite brands. My hobby shop changed brands. So I don't have any experience with these, but I know that they're going to paint about the same as everything else. If your local hobby shop has the Games Workshop paints, fantastic. They're actually very good paints. They're very beginner friendly, but you can get highly advanced techniques with them later on as your skills grow. Army Painter, very good. Vallejo, very good. Don't worry about it too much. Just make sure to ask the guy at the counter that it's a good base color paint as opposed to like what they call a layer paint or an airbrush paint, something like that. You want something with good color density. Most of your base or basic paints are actually what you're looking for. You're also going to need a brush. I'm going to do this guy with one brush. Got it right here. Monument Pro Synthetic #1. You're going to see a lot of videos out there, people having 4, 5, 6 different size brushes. That's okay. When you get to that point, you'll get to that point. A #1 size brush is actually a very good balance between area coverage and detail. It'll serve you very well. If you want to, you can pick up a bigger brush than this, but that's really all you're going to need. Now the other thing too is that these are dropper bottles, meaning that you open up the little top and you can drip paint out if you want to. These are nice because they also unscrew, so you can use them as traditional dip bottles, but some brands are basically dropper only, and in that case you're going to need some kind of palette. Now, I have these Games Workshop palette pads, basically just like it's like a little booklet of paper that's disposable for this sort of thing. If you don't have that, honestly, like a paper plate, is actually going to be sufficient. Just something you can drip the paint on and start working with it. Now, we are going to get going here on this. The one thing I'm going to show you here with my first piece of technique, weirdly enough, is I put it together and then I take it apart. So let me get over to the bench here and we'll start showing you how this goes. We'll give it a little bit of spin here as a before picture. Now, these SD EX Gundams are a blank slate, just no color separation at all. And look at the back of those legs. There is just nothing there to show. But that's what's cool about these. Now, the reason I take it apart, well, the reason I put it together first before I take it apart is so I can have it down in sub-assemblies by color, and I can know where I'm approaching it, how I'm approaching it, what things I need to have assembled and disassembled. Some people like to put everything together first, then paint it. Some people paint it all on the runners. I like to do this method here. I do end up taking the whole face apart as well before I go much further. Now for priming, I apologize for showing the back of my hand so much, but I had the camera in the wrong place. This Games Workshop primer, honestly, I'm not too much of a fan of it. It doesn't cover very well, as you'll see on some of these more colored parts, such as the V-fin and later on the torso. But the reason you want to use the white primer here is because these Gundams are primarily white in color, and painting white on top of other colors is very difficult. Painting other colors on top of white is not so bad at all. So the fact that you're going to see a lot of the color still showing through here on the torso, I'm not too worried about that because I'm going to go ahead and paint that later. But I need the white to stay where it is to keep the overall look looking its best. Now, I have this piece here. This is a leg piece from a Sinanju Stein build I did a while back. I keep all my spare parts, and I'll use them sometimes like this as test samples. Because I've never used this paint before, I kind of want to give a little bit of a test before I go on to anything else. I do have a little bit of clean water here with my brush and my palette pad. And for the black, I'm actually going to use this Pro Acro Blue Black. I think it matches the anime color better than just a pure black. And I'm going to take a page here out of that palette pad. Now this page is going to be tossed at the end of the project, but should last me the whole time. Paint gets a good shake, and you're going to put a little, just one drop onto the page here. Now be careful because this stuff, if you squeeze too hard, you can pop the top off and get paint everywhere, or just put on too much. This is about what I want. Take my brush. I am going to add a little bit of water onto the palette pad here. I'm also wetting my bristles to help it flow better. And you're going to see I'm going to take a bit of paint, put it on a spot next to the water, and add some water in it and try to work for that correct consistency. You'll also notice I'm not getting my entire bristle into the paint. You only want about half the bristle to have paint on it. And I had a little twisting motion that I pull as I did it there, and that takes the excess paint off the brush, making sure you're not overloading it, and gives the point of it of a sharper tip. Now you'll notice here, and this is a problem I had through a lot of the build, it kind of, the paint kind of flowed in puddled. So I had this surface tension issue. I don't know where it came from, whether it was the brush, the cup for my water or whatever. I did find that more paint reduced that issue. And I did also find that this particular paint doesn't actually do too bad even straight out of the bottle without water to thin it. I still recommend thinning it, especially for finer details, because you don't want too many brush strokes. And if you go straight out of the bottle, you can it can glop on, and just the surface condition, the surface quality just will not be very good. And for the first part I painted, I took the eye section here out of the head because there's a lot of area here that is just not going to be shown. So I did this wide area, and if you notice, I'm doing this pulling motion, just kind of a straight pull in the direction of the brush. This is good because you push a little bit harder, it'll widen the bristles and coat a wider area. But if you don't push very hard, the bristles stay close together, you get more precision control. And also that motion just tends to be more straight and gives you more precision when you're using it. But like I said, I did these non-visible areas first, just kind of as a warm-up, and to get myself used to it. And also I have these alligator clip things. I think I got them at Hobby Lobby for holding the paint. Now here, I'm actually going up against a raised section of the eyes, and this is where that pulling motion gives me the most benefit, because you can see I can keep a nice straight line next to that raised ridge, and I'll do that kind of cutting in around the eye section completely. I am not painting the eye. Now a little bit of the black paint kind of does sneak in there a bit, and it does end up being a little visible on the green for the first couple coats of the green, but for the most part you want to avoid getting any of the darker paint into that lighter area, because that is going to be a different color, and painting over darker colors can be not fun. But I just kept, and sometimes you got to get at weird angles to hold it, but I just kept that pulling motion going all the way around and got everything into where I wanted it to be. It looks pretty good there. It's not perfect. Like I said, a little bit of the black snuck in, but I'm okay with what I got. Next, I'm moving to the red paint, and I did clean my brush before I went to this. I forgot to take a little video of it, and I also did, as you can see, there's no tint to my water, so I did clean the water, get some fresh water. I'm going to do that same thing here, where I'm kind of mixing some water, mixing some paint, getting the consistency I want. Since I've done it a couple times, I got a good idea what I need, and I'm going to do the chin section here, again with the straight pulling motion with the brush. Now, I'm only looking to get a smooth, even coat. I'm not worried about how rich the color is. I'm lucky here because it's sort of got a pink tone to it already, and the red covers pretty nicely. But if I had a smooth coat and the color just wasn't as rich as I wanted to, I would wait, let it dry, and paint it again later. Multiple thin coats will get you a much smoother finish than one thick coat of paint. Moving on to the green, same process. Again, as you can see, cleaned my water, cleaned my brush. A little bit of paint over there, and a little bit of water. Get the consistency I'm looking for. And this time you're going to see a different brush motion. But again, see that little pull and twist? That gets me just a sharp point, loads the brush up where I want it to be, and make sure I don't have too much paint. Here you're going to see I'm actually going to move a side to side motion. Now when you're on ridges like this, where you're up on top of an edge, I find that gets me a sharper edge, and it gives me less mistakes where I go down into the other area. And just going to go around the edges first, and then fill in the center of this eye, get it nice and green. And again, I did not get the best coat there, but I got an accurate coat. So I'm going to go back, and you might see it a couple times later on. Probably went over this green spot on the eyes like 3 or 4 times to get the color richness that I wanted, but don't rush it. Like I said, just work on your accuracy. The color richness, it comes from multiple coats, not one thick coat. You want at least 2 thin coats, if not more. Working around the edges and fill in the center as I go. And there, just nice and smooth and easy, taking my time as I paint up the eyeballs. I'm not going to show you every part to this extent, but this is one of the ones where it kind of shows the most techniques in one shot to show you how I'm doing this. And like I said, this paint dries pretty quick, so these second coats tend to be pretty quick. But if it's really a tricky color, you'll just let it dry for a while before you go back and do it again. While I had the green out, I also went in and started working on some of the other details, such as this lens section on the helmet. Now this is an annoying spot to paint because it's such a deep recess, and also because my camera wasn't focused, so I apologize for that. But again, I work around the edges, and I keep having to turn my part in my hand to get the angle that gets me the most comfortable. Don't rush these sort of things. Just work on your accuracy, work on being careful. The green, especially on the white here, is going to take a couple coats to get full coverage of the paint. You're just worried about having the paint where you want it to be. Now, let all that stuff set aside to dry. I started working on some of the other parts, cleaning my brush in between. Just a swish in the water because these paints are water cleanup, and then wipe it onto the paper towel, being very careful not to bang the bristles into things. But as you'll see, I keep doing that until I have clean water coming off my brush with no color in it. Now the hands are a bit of a trickier one because there are so many nooks and crannies to them, especially on the inside. They are a single piece hand. Now the unique thing on these is that they were molded in black, and priming them in white got me almost where I wanted to be, but I do have to go back on these later and add some white just to richen it up. But having at least a decent white coat first, when I went back to brush, made it a lot easier. The black, like I said, is just a bit frustrating because all the little nooks and crannies and dips and divots and everything in there. So it's just a lot of add paint, add water, work on my mixture, and go back and do more. Now after a while, if you have to, clean your brush, get some get it nice and fresh and clean, get some fresh water, use a different spot on your palette, because over time it will glop up and start getting too thick. Now, the torso is an interesting spot because it is so big and there's so many angles and everything like that. There's so much paint. It's going to take a while. And this is where you're going to encounter what I call the ugly phase of your build. Every build is going to have this. No matter what you do, the more advanced you get, the uglier your ugly phase will be. It's okay. Don't worry about it. But you're going to get to a spot, and for me, it was painting this torso, where it just felt like everything I was doing was not coming out right and that this build was going horribly wrong. And here I was committing to do a video to teach people how to do their first Gundam, and this Gundam was starting to really suck. It's just, like I said, it is the ugly phase, and sometimes you just need to put it down for a while, take a break, come back later, and try again. The nice thing is that if you're persistent and you're careful and you just take your time on things, you will get past that. And once I got the torso painted up nice and solid, this build got to be a lot more fun for me. But this torso was, it was trying, I'm not gonna lie. But like I said, every build will have an ugly phase. Now you'll also notice I am avoiding painting some areas on this. You have those white chest section up on top, there's a red rectangle on the bottom, and also you have these yellow vents. Now this is what's good to have your instructions nearby to know what you're supposed to paint, what you're not supposed to paint, because you definitely want to keep those areas in the bright white primer as long as you can. Try your best not to get this blue black into those areas because it will be very difficult to get those bright colors back in there. Now when it comes to those details, this crotch section here, this was a challenge, but it was a fun challenge. It's hard to see in the picture here, but in the center of this area is just a little raised triangle area that's going to be getting yellow later. But I am very careful. Again, you can see I'm using very little paint and taking my time to make sure just to paint what I want and leave that area clear. And while I was at it, since I was already working on other stuff, took a break, went back, another coat of green in the helmet. Now this detail portion where you're starting to do all these little details, this for me is the fun area because you're starting to really see results for what you're doing rather than just blobbing stuff on and just making big areas in different colors. There was of course another lens area on the back of the helmet, more green, not too bad, but again tricky in this area as well. Actually I ended up having to clean all this off, reprime it, repaint it because I slipped. They got a big green stripe across the back of the helmet. But back down to the torso with more of the red detail areas. And it's really, from this point on, it's going to follow pretty much the same methodology for the rest of the build, where you're going to be going back and forth between different areas, different colors. Follow your mood on this one. If you think you want to paint a certain section, go for it. Put the other things down and do the parts that you want to paint. And again, I'm doing that straight pull motion, working the edges on it, and then going back for the center. The fundamentals here are pretty much going to stay the same through the rest of the build. You just want to build up those skills and just get the muscle memory going and get used to what you're doing and get used to the thinning of the paint. This torso was actually a pretty complicated little section. I didn't expect it. There was a lot more detail areas on there as I was going through it. As I looked at the instructions, there's a lot of the dark blue, black is going to go on there. There'll be a lot of yellow. And it's just patience, patience, patience is the key here. Keep your brush clean. Keep the point of it sharp. And if you have to, take a break, move to something else. But on this one, like I said, this was fun, and this red goes on so well on top of the white. It just, this is the sort of spot where after the ugly phase, I started seeing the benefit of it all. And for the remainder of the build, pretty much those fundamentals will carry you through all the way to the end. I do recommend, though, doing the helmet either last or close to last, just because of how fine some of the details on it are. The Vulcans here were definitely tricky to do. They weren't that bad, but they're definitely tricky to do. Take your time and do them nicely. And of course there is one on each side of the forehead. And these are the kind of details you're just not going to be able to get if you're just doing put it together and put the stickers on, because these things are not in the stickers. And this kind of painting, this is why you do it. This kind of stuff here is what really brings that sparkle that otherwise isn't there. And I'm not going to lie, these vents here were another tricky spot. There's about 8 of them, 4 on each side, maybe 5 on each side, and deep recesses. And I'm not going to lie, I did goof up from time to time getting paint on there and have to touch it up with white later on. But around this point of the build is when I really, I went from the low point of that ugly phase. This is when things really started to get fun for me and started to move along a lot more quickly once I started to actually be able to assemble everything, because I started the torso and I'm able to start put other parts on there. But I wasn't wouldn't be remiss though if I didn't warn you about yellow. Yellow is as bad as white for painting. Now I lucked out here in that a couple big yellow portions of the kit were already molded in yellow plastic, and I primed it in white. So the V-fin came out very nice, which is very important to have that look good because of how prominent and bright it is. Of course, the center section gets that blue-black. Again, sticker would not have done it justice. The chest vents, though, they were a lot of work. But from this point on, like I said, the fundamentals are going to carry you to the end of this build. Whether the part is one of the accessories, arm, leg, what have you, the basics of how you're brushing and painting everything on is going to be the same. Just find your way to approach it and put things together on there. The fin funnels, I kind of, I've had to find a bit of a technique for it, but once I got them done, they also looked quite good. The beam saber. Now, the beam saber on these kits comes in a molded plastic as opposed to the normal, like semi-transparent. I did have a lot of those issues with that surface tension problem, but I got the beam saber looking good. And then I did end up, and look at that, I put the manual right in my paint. I ended up using 2 of the stickers, the Amuro Ray symbology on there. I am just not good enough to freehand that stuff, nor would I expect anybody to be able to freehand these things at this point. But the very last thing I did was put those stickers on. Of course, you got the one on the shield there, and then you have your second one on the front of the left shoulder. And then at this point, we can call this build done and complete. You have the Nu Gundam SD EX version all ready to go. And I would not disappoint you guys. I wanted to give this one a full spinny to show you how this thing looked. Compared to how the one at the beginning was, you can definitely see the effort for this paint it's definitely there. And I only used 6 colors. A couple of them are only in a couple of spots. This is the kind of build, the kind of paint that I really expect any beginner to be able to reach with just a little bit of patience, a little bit of time, and the results are definitely there to make you happy with what you end up with. Now, I'm going to say I've done a lot of modeling over the years, and this may not be at the top level of what I've done, but I'm actually really stinking happy with how this came out. If you look at what we started with, which was honestly pretty shaky looking with how few colors and how that looked, this thing looks fantastic. And I'm actually really happy to put this guy up on my shelf with my other stuff, especially if you think about the fact that it's probably been a very long time since I've done a full brush paint job on an entire Gundam. So I'm very happy with this, and that's what we did this for, was to do something that makes us happy, right? If you guys learned something from this video, that makes it even better. So, but look at what we did here. We took bare minimum of paints, a single brush, and 1 Gundam, and look at what we accomplished. The nice thing is, if you want to do your second Gundam, take out that dark blue, you put in a regular blue there, you're good for the protagonist of pretty much any series. We're talking the RX-78, good old Grandpa Gundam, Wing Zero, the Barbatos, G-Quux, Ariel, Strike Freedom, the 00. I mean, this paint palette here is going to cover you for quite some time to come. And you can just expand on this, add maybe a silver, some other colors for your next one, just a little bit more to put in there, pick up a different brush. So this is your base to get you going. This is just your starting point. You have so much more room to grow as you do this. And some of you are probably wondering, well, what about all these other techniques I hear about? I hear about panel lining, I hear about edge highlighting, stuff like that. I'm going to have a second video, if you guys want, that covers those sort of things. So put it into the comments, ask these questions, and let me know what you want to see for follow-up videos. Because like I said, this guy, I'm very happy with where this is, but that doesn't mean I can't do more. And I do plan on doing more and showing you that as well. So on that though, we're going to close out this video very happy and with what we have here. And I'll just ask you guys, as usual, as every other stinking YouTuber asks, like and subscribe, because I know I'm making fun of myself here, but seriously, the likes and the subscribes do help me know that what I'm doing is actually entertaining for you. The comments are even better, so put your questions in there. I'll answer as best as I can. Might cover it in a future video, but I do hope I've inspired at least one person, and you know who you are. We've talked about this. I do hope I've inspired at least one person to give this a try, because even if it's not perfect, like I said, this is your starting point. This isn't your ending point. It's just a path that you're going to start growing onto and enjoying further and further going forward. So on that, I'm going to check out here. So this has been Hobby Reviews by Hans, and we'll see you next time.